Have you ever wondered why many African elders become serious whenever someone picks up a broom after dark? Some say sweeping at night drives away wealth. Others believe it sweeps away blessings. And there are those who whisper that after sunset the ground no longer belongs to human beings alone. Many young people laugh whenever they hear such warnings. They call them old superstitions. But every old warning has a beginning. This is the story of how one careless night changed a family's life forever, and why, even today, many people still refuse to sweep after darkness falls. Many years ago, there lived a widow named Mary. She was known throughout the village as a woman who feared God, respected the elders, and never took what belonged to another person. She had only one child, a 16-year-old daughter named Grace. The two lived alone in a small mud house with a thatched roof. Their life was simple. Every morning before the first rooster crowed, Mary left home carrying her hoe and basket. She worked on other people's farms, harvesting cassava, weeding yam mounds, or carrying heavy bundles for little pay. Grace stayed behind to fetch water from the stream, prepare breakfast, clean the compound, gather firewood, and later carry vegetables to the market. Neither of them complained much. They believed that honest work would one day change their lives. Still, there were many nights when their supper was nothing more than boiled yam with a little palm oil. Sometimes even that was not enough. Yet Mary always smiled. Never be jealous of another person's blessings, she often told Grace. Your own blessing will arrive at the right time. Grace would nod politely. But inside, she was growing tired. One afternoon, Grace returned from the market carrying almost the same basket of vegetables she had left with that morning. She dropped it on the floor with frustration. Mary looked up. Not many customers today? Grace shook her head. I sold only 3 tomatoes. Mary walked over and counted the few coins in Grace's hand. It is enough to buy salt. Grace sighed deeply. Mother, are we always going to live like this? Mary smiled gently. I asked myself the same question when I was your age. And one day I discovered that worrying does not make blessings come faster. Grace looked away. But hard work isn't helping either. Mary placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Do not measure your life by what others own. Grace forced a smile, but her heart was heavy. She had watched girls younger than herself wear beautiful wrappers and beads. She had seen families replace old mud houses with stronger ones. Meanwhile, nothing seemed to change for them. That evening, dark clouds gathered across the sky. Before long, a heavy rainstorm swept through the village. Strong winds blew leaves into every compound. Branches snapped. Dust covered cooking pots. The rain lasted for hours. When it finally stopped, the compound outside Mary's house looked as though a whirlwind had danced across it. Dry leaves, broken twigs, and mud were everywhere. Grace stepped outside carrying a lantern. Oh no. She looked around in disappointment. It will take forever to clean this. Mary joined her at the doorway. It can wait until morning. Grace frowned. But the whole compound is dirty. The morning is not far away. Grace looked at the sky. It is still early. Mary's expression suddenly became serious. No. We do not sweep after dark. Grace laughed softly. Mother, it is only dirt. Mary's voice remained calm. My own mother warned me. Her own mother warned her. When darkness settles, the broom must rest. Grace leaned against the doorway. I have heard that since I was little, but no one has ever explained why. Mary looked toward the darkness beyond the compound. There are some questions whose answers cost too much. Grace folded her arms. So you don't know either? I know enough to obey. Grace smiled. I think people simply made up stories to stop children from making noise at night. Mary shook her head. Not every tradition is born from fear. Some are born from experience. As they prepared supper, Grace continued thinking about the dirty compound. The wind kept blowing more leaves toward the doorway. Every few minutes she glanced outside. Mary noticed. Leave it. Grace sighed. It is bothering me. The leaves will still be there in the morning. After supper they prayed together and prepared to sleep. The oil lamp burned quietly. Outside, the night became strangely still. Even the crickets seemed quieter than usual. Grace lay awake staring at the ceiling. The image of the untidy compound refused to leave her mind. Finally, she heard Mary's breathing become slow and steady. Her mother had fallen asleep. Grace sat up carefully. It will only take a few minutes, she whispered to herself. I'll finish before Mother wakes. She quietly picked up the broom. The wooden door creaked softly as she stepped outside. The night air was cool. Clouds drifted across the moon, allowing only faint light to reach the ground. Grace lifted the lantern and looked around. Nothing. No one. Only leaves dancing gently across the earth. She smiled. You see? Nothing to fear. She lowered the broom. Shhhh. The first sweep gathered several dry leaves into one corner. Nothing happened. She swept again. Shhhh. Still nothing. Grace laughed quietly. So this is the great danger. She swept harder. Then, another sweeping sound answered her. Shhhh. Grace froze. Her broom had stopped moving. Yet somewhere behind her, someone else was sweeping. Slowly. Patiently. Shhhh. Shhhh. Her heart began to pound. She turned around. Nothing. Only darkness. She swallowed hard. It must be the wind. She faced the leaves again. This is foolish. She swept once more. Immediately, the second broom answered again. Shhhh. This time, it came from directly in front of her. Not behind. Not beside. Ahead. As though someone invisible was sweeping toward her. One sweep. Then another. Each one closer than the last. Grace tightened her grip on the broom. Who's there? Silence. She raised the lantern higher. The compound was empty. But then, the lantern flame suddenly flickered. The wind stopped completely. Every sound in the night disappeared. And from somewhere inside the darkness, a woman's voice whispered. So, another one has forgotten. Grace's entire body turned cold. The lantern slipped from her hand. The flame went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Then, she heard footsteps. Not running. Walking. Slowly. Toward her. Step. 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 Grace could not see who was coming. But she knew. Someone was there. Someone who had not been there before. She screamed, dropped the broom, and ran into the house without looking back. She slammed the wooden door shut and leaned against it, struggling to breathe. Her mother woke immediately. Grace. What happened? Grace opened her mouth. But no words came out. Outside, something gently brushed against the door. Shhhh. Like a broom, sweeping across the ground. Then, 3 slow knocks echoed through the night. Knock. 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 Mary's face lost all color. Without saying a word, she slowly turned toward the door. Mary did not move. She stood frozen, staring at the wooden door. The 3 knocks did not come again. Instead, the sound of sweeping returned. Shhhh. Shhhh. It moved slowly across the compound. Neither Mary nor Grace spoke. They listened as the strange sound circled the house. First to one side, then behind the kitchen, then back to the front. It was as if someone was searching for something. Or someone. Grace grabbed her mother's hand. I heard a woman speaking. Mary's face became pale. What did she say? Grace swallowed. She said, "Another one has forgotten." Mary closed her eyes. "Oh, no. What have you done, my child?" The sweeping continued for several more minutes. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything became silent. Not even the wind moved. Mary whispered, "Do not open that door, no matter what you hear." The 2 of them remained awake until the first rooster crowed. Only then did Mary slowly unbolt the door. Morning light filled the compound. Everything looked normal. Almost. Grace noticed something strange. The pile of leaves she had swept together during the night was gone. Completely gone. Not even a single dry leaf remained. Instead, the ground was smooth. Too smooth. As though someone had swept the entire compound far better than she ever could. Her forgotten broom lay near the gate. Its handle was covered with fine white dust. Mary walked toward it but refused to touch it. She looked around the compound. Then she whispered, "It has entered." Grace looked confused. "What has entered?" Mary did not answer. She picked up a small calabash of water and sprinkled it around the doorway while praying softly. Grace had never seen her mother do that before. Later that morning, Grace carried her vegetables to the market. Normally, customers greeted her with smiles. But that day, something felt wrong. People looked at her strangely. One woman stopped in front of her basket. She picked up 2 tomatoes. Then suddenly frowned. "I don't want these." She walked away. Another customer counted out some coins. Just as she was about to pay, she changed her mind and left without saying a word. My midday. Grace had sold almost nothing. She sighed. This has never happened before. As she packed her basket to return home, an elderly woman selling firewood called out, "Grace." Grace turned. The old woman looked at her carefully. "You look tired." "I couldn't sell anything today." The old woman nodded slowly. Then her eyes fell on Grace's hands. "You held a broom after dark." Grace's heart skipped. "How? How did you know?" The old woman did not answer. She simply shook her head. "Child, some mistakes follow a person home." Before Grace could ask another question, the old woman had already turned away. That evening, Mary searched for the small cloth purse where she kept every coin they had saved over the past year. She looked under sleeping mats, inside clay pots, behind wooden boxes. Nothing. The purse had disappeared. Mary sat down quietly. Grace searched the house again and again. It has to be somewhere. But it wasn't. Mary looked at her daughter. Tell me everything. Grace burst into tears. She confessed how she had secretly swept after Mary had gone to sleep. She described the second broom, the whisper, the footsteps, the knocking. Mary listened without interrupting. When Grace finished, Mary sighed deeply. My mother warned me that this day could come. Grace stared at her. You mean, you knew this story? Mary nodded. But I never believed anyone in our family would ignore it. Grace's voice trembled. Mother, what have I done? Mary answered softly. I don't know. But whatever followed you home, it has begun taking. The days that followed became harder. Their only hen disappeared without a trace. 2 weeks later, their yam harvest failed. The vegetables in Grace's small garden dried up even though rain continued to fall. Every plan they made seemed to fail. People who once trusted Mary suddenly avoided borrowing her services. It was as though an unseen hand pushed every blessing away from them. Grace blamed herself. One night she cried, I'm sorry, Mother. I should have listened. Mary hugged her tightly. Regret cannot change yesterday, but perhaps wisdom can save tomorrow. Then, the dreams began. Every single night, Grace dreamed of the same woman. She never saw the woman's face, only her old hands holding a long village broom. The woman swept slowly across a dusty path. But no matter how much she swept, the dust never disappeared. Instead, each sweep carried away something else. A basket, a pot, a goat, a handful of coins, even smiling faces. Everything she swept simply vanished into darkness. Then the woman would stop. Without turning around, she would ask, What else should I take? Grace always woke up screaming. One evening, after another frightening dream, Grace decided she had had enough. I want to know who that woman is. Mary immediately shook her head. No. But we cannot continue living like this. There are questions better left unanswered. Grace stood. If I caused this, then I must fix it. Mary remained silent. Finally she said, Tomorrow, we will visit Elder Samuel. Grace nodded. Everyone respected Elder Samuel. He was one of the oldest men in the village. People often sought his advice whenever strange things happened. If anyone knew the truth, it would be him. The next morning, Mary and Grace walked to the elder's compound. He welcomed them kindly. After listening carefully to every detail, he closed his eyes for a long time. The room became silent. Finally, he opened them. There is an old story. A story almost forgotten. Grace leaned forward. It began many generations ago. But before I tell you, you must answer one question. Grace nodded. The elder looked directly into her eyes. When you heard the second broom, did it sound angry or lonely? Grace felt chills run down her spine. She had never thought about it before. She closed her eyes and remembered. The slow sweeping, the whisper, the footsteps. Then she opened her eyes again. It sounded sad. The elder's face changed. He let out a long breath. I feared you would say that. Grace's heart pounded. What does that mean? The elder slowly stood up. He walked toward an old wooden chest in the corner of the room. From inside, he removed something wrapped in faded cloth. He placed it gently on the floor. Then he uncovered it. Grace gasped. It was an ancient broom. Its handle was cracked with age. Yet, the straw looked strangely new. The elder looked at Grace and whispered, "This is where the story truly begins." Grace could not take her eyes off the old broom. It looked ordinary. Yet the moment Elder Samuel uncovered it, the room felt colder. He gently picked it up and rested it across his knees. Then he looked at Mary and Grace. "What I am about to tell you was told to me by my grandfather. His own grandfather heard it from the people who witnessed it." He paused. "That is why we no longer sweep after dark." Grace leaned forward. "It all began with a woman named Hannah. Many generations before Mary and Grace were born, Hannah lived with her husband and 2 young children. Like Mary, she was hardworking. Unlike Mary, she was impatient. She believed the elders knew nothing. Whenever they warned people not to do something, she laughed. "They are only trying to control us," she would say. One harvest season, the village celebrated a successful farming year. Families cooked large meals. Children played. Drums echoed long into the evening. By the time everyone returned home, darkness had already covered the land. When Hannah entered her compound, she found it littered with leaves, food scraps, and ashes from the celebration. She frowned. "I will not sleep in this mess." Her elderly neighbor called from across the fence, "Hannah, leave it until morning." Hannah laughed. "I have heard that story since I was a child. There is no spirit hiding in dry leaves." The old woman replied quietly, "Not every spirit hides. Some simply pass through." Hannah waved her away. "I am not afraid." She picked up her broom. The first few sweeps felt normal. Nothing happened. She laughed. "You see?" Then, another broom answered. "Shhhh." She stopped. The second broom stopped. She swept again. Again. The strange broom copied her. Her smile disappeared. She looked around. No one. She hurried to finish. As she reached the gate, a cold voice spoke behind her. "Thank you for clearing my path." Hannah turned. An old woman dressed in faded white stood just outside the gate. Her face was hidden beneath a cloth. In one hand, she carried a broom. Before Hannah could speak, the stranger slowly swept across the entrance. 1 sweep, 2 sweeps, 3 sweeps. Then she vanished into the darkness. The next morning, Hannah's youngest child became seriously ill. A week later, her goats disappeared. Her harvest failed. Her husband lost his trading business. Every blessing that had once filled their home slowly disappeared. She begged the elders for help. They sent for the oldest spiritual leader of that time. After listening carefully, he said, "You swept away more than dirt. You swept away the welcome that heaven had placed upon your home." Hannah cried. "I didn't know." The old man nodded sadly. "That is why wisdom is passed from one generation to another." Grace listened in complete silence. Then she asked, "So, who was the woman with the broom?" Elder Samuel looked at the ancient broom in his hands. "No one knows exactly. Some believed she was a wandering spirit. Others believed she was a messenger sent to test human obedience. and some believed she was simply a sign that blessings quietly leave the homes of people who ignore wisdom. He smiled gently. The truth was never the most important part. Grace frowned. It wasn't. No. The lesson was. Grace lowered her head. I understand now. But can our blessings return? The elder nodded. Blessings often return to humble hearts. But first, you must stop fearing the broom. You must fear pride. He handed the ancient broom to Grace. Take this outside. She hesitated. Don't worry. It cannot harm you. Grace slowly carried it outside. The elder pointed toward a small fire burning in the middle of his compound. Place it in the fire. Grace obeyed. The old broom caught fire almost immediately. The dry straw crackled loudly. Then something unexpected happened. A powerful wind swept across the compound. The flames rose high into the air. Everyone closed their eyes. For just one brief moment, Grace thought she heard a familiar voice. Soft. Gentle. Almost relieved. At last. Then. Silent. The wind stopped. The fire settled. The feeling of heaviness that had followed Grace for weeks suddenly disappeared. She took a deep breath. For the first time since that terrible night, she felt peace. From that day forward, their lives slowly changed. A wealthy farmer asked Mary to manage his harvest. Grace's vegetables became the first to sell in the market. Neighbors once again trusted them. Months later, someone found Mary's missing cloth purse caught beneath the roots of a large tree after heavy rain had washed away the soil. Every coin was still inside. Mary smiled. Our blessings have found their way home. Grace hugged her tightly. I will never ignore your wisdom again. Mary smiled. My wisdom? She laughed softly. No. The wisdom of those who came before us. Years passed. Grace married and had children. Then grandchildren. Whenever evening approached, she always finished sweeping before sunset. If one of her children reached for a broom after dark, she would gently stop them. They always asked, Mother, is it because of spirits? Grace would smile. Maybe. Or maybe it is because discipline protects the blessings that carelessness destroys. She never argued. She simply told them the story. As the years passed, the story spread from one family to another. Parents taught their children. Grandparents reminded their grandchildren. Eventually, people no longer remembered Hannah's name. Some forgot Elder Samuel. Others forgot Mary. But one lesson remained. Never sweep after dark. Not because every unseen story must be literally true, but because the habit teaches patience, respect, gratitude, and obedience to wisdom passed down through generations. Some people still believe unseen visitors walk after sunset. Others believe the tradition encouraged families to finish their work before night, when valuable items like coins, jewelry, seeds, or tools could easily be swept away in the darkness. Whatever the origin, the warning survived because it carried a lesson worth remembering. And even today, when darkness settles over many homes across Igbo land, someone will still say, leave the broom where it is. It can wait until morning, because some blessings are too precious to risk for a few leaves on the ground. Whether a tradition has a spiritual or practical origin, understanding its purpose is more valuable than mocking it.